screen starts glowing and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the easy good score.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Goods, a film podcast. Brian here. Dan, are you there?
I am, Brian.
Well, welcome to you. Glad to be here again for episode 246. So we just wrapped up last week a theme month where each week of the month we have a kind of common theme that binds them all together and kind of fences in what movies we pick to talk about. Well, now we're outside the fence. We're out of bounds. We could pick any possible thing we want. And so I was trying to figure out what movie do we discuss this time. And I settled on The Lobster from 2015, directed and written at least in part by Yorgos Lanthimos. Had you seen this one before, Dan?
I had definitely seen clips of it. It must have either been like on a TV or something when I was around, because just little snippets of it, I'd be like, I've definitely seen this before, but I had never seen it from start to finish and had not had the full effect of it prior to this past week.
Right. It was new to me as well. I've actually never seen Yorgos Lanthimos film. And so the path that kind of led me to this movie was we are 246 episodes in, and so we've covered a lot of ground. And I definitely still have movies that I want to talk about at this point, but what I had ready to go in the hopper was a lot of stuff where it's films that I have seen and that I know that I like. And so it's, it's not exactly fair to call it a slush pile, because it's stuff it'll foster good discussion, but it's like, a bunch of 7s and 8s that I have left, and I just can't dole those out all at once. It would be boring. And so I wanted something fresh, something I hadn't seen before, and so it was a toss-up for me between two movies that I have not seen, but I knew involved people being transformed into animals. So it was either going to be The Lobster or Tusk. And I gather that after having watched The Lobster now, those two movies are fairly different.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would have pegged them as sharing that. I mean, I guess I don't know exactly what Tusk is, but I've seen like maybe a trailer and maybe some screen caps from it. So I think I have the gist of it. And that's like a horror movie where a person gets brutalized and gradually transformed, I think, into a walrus or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Animal transformation is like the narrative pretense, but it's also not really the story. And the tone, it just couldn't be further from horror.
Yeah, hard to say what genre this movie, The Lobster, falls into. I was left with a blank on our master spreadsheet. It's absurdist. I don't know if that's a genre. Maybe it's a comedy. What did you think?
Yeah, it's comedy or drama. I would lean towards drama, a funny drama or a drama with comic elements. But you could also go with comedy. I mean, maybe romance. I don't know.
There's some satire going on.
Yeah, definitely.
So Yorgos Lanthimos, he's Greek, but a lot of the actors in the film are Irish, and it was shot in Ireland. And so this is St. Patrick's Day week. Tomorrow, as we sit here and record, will be St. Patrick's Day. I think it arguably fits as a St. Patrick's Day pick because I think it's got some of the absurdism in the vein of like Samuel Beckett, like Waiting for Godot or something. or also James Joyce, where like people will matter-of-factly say things in this movie that just seem like non sequiturs or like nonsense, but they say it with like conviction. And then you're left reckoning with, wait a minute, what did that mean? Did that mean anything?
I don't even know if conviction is the right way I'd say it. It's like they say it as if it doesn't mean anything. They just utter it. They're like, I am now blind. Okay, cool. Like, I feel like you would say that a little differently than the way you just said it if that's something that happened to you in real life.
Oh, I was talking about things like when the one guy, Colin Farrell's friend, is discussing the weight of a volleyball. He's like, now, you know, volleyballs manufactured on the continent way differently than those manufactured in the British Isle.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like me to tell you the specific weight? And this, I think it was nominated for the best screenplay Oscar. I don't think it won, but it definitely, the dialogue and kind of the cadence of the script feels very different than most movies I've seen. It feels kind of fresh.
It's definitely a distinct thing going for its own flavor. I struggled a lot trying to think about how I felt about this movie. I think it's the kind of movie where it's doing such a distinct thing with like such a strong flavor, but it's like that almost makes it seem more than it is. It's like I don't know, but it relies upon vibes extensively. You need to be in its vibe zone to really appreciate this movie. There are some things you might be able to admire about it, but how much you go for the lobster, I feel like is just going to be how much are you on this wavelength.
I'm really curious to see where we both land on this movie. And yeah, if you distinguish yourself and like carve out a unique enough niche for yourself, it's easier to attain like rarefied status and stand out. I speak having played the contrabass clarinet in high school. In middle school, they said, hey, there's too many clarinets. If you go ahead and play the bass clarinet, you'll be in the upper band. I was like, oh, all right, I'll do that. You know,
Yeah,
easy decision.
you found a niche.
It's like a cheat code. And then in high school, it's like, well, okay, you're in the top band, but you could be in the district band if you play the contrabass clarinet. It's like, all right, I'm the only, there's only like three in the district and they need them all to fill out the bands.
This is definitely a thing that you read about. Like if you're trying to write something, for example, whether it's a book or whether it's a publication online or something, they talk about finding your niche. The goal is to find a niche that is underexploited, like supply versus demand, you know? So the example that you talked about, it was a great supply versus demand. There was not many bass clarinets and they need one per band. So long, or contrabass or whatever one you were saying. So long as that was true, then it was a shoe in for you. But Brian, if there had been like, let's say there had been two really good contrabass, just two really good players in the district, you would have been completely locked out. You just never would have found your way in because you were dominated because that niche was overexploited. I sometimes feel that way. That's like a kind of a weird analogy, but to like weird movies where I think this is kind of what you're saying. Why you mentioned that experience is it can be easy to overrate the movie and maybe also easy to underrate the movie if it's weird because the way that it's different from other things becomes the notable thing about it. And thus the question is, do you like the ways in which it is different from what you normally see rather than how well is it doing that and stuff? And in some cases, I actually think that's fair because, like in this case, I was trying to think of the word, and I think the word is affectlessly or disaffectedly or something like that. Like it doesn't have affect the way that everything is presented in a sort of like detached, surreal tone. I'm not a dictionary guy, but what if you were a dictionary guy? What would that mean? I don't know.
I move for a bad court thingy.
But anyways, it so pointedly uses that mechanism that it basically asks you to pass judgment on the very mechanism of doing that and less so on the other things. So I don't know.
Well said. My feeling watching this is I'm pretty sure I have criticized specific things in other episodes that I'm going to praise in this movie, and I don't really know how to like justify that other than to say it worked for me here. Like there are other weird movies where the way that they were weird grinded my gears and I didn't get it, but here I was most of the time on the wavelength. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time. And ultimately I'm going to come in fairly high on this one.
And I'm kind of in the opposite boat where I so I was thinking a lot about this other movie that I watched recently and that I just really adored. And it's this really dumb movie called Ham on Rye. It came out in 2019. Its budget was like probably about the same as the budget for your short film, Brian. It was like $10,000 or $15,000 or something like that. And made all with non-professional actors by this director named Tyler Taormina, Taormina, or something like that. And this guy's now made three movies, and I've loved all three of them. And I'm also convinced that like nobody else could possibly love this movie because it's weird and aimless in an exact way that appealed to me. And I kept thinking about as I was watching The Lobster, is like the way that I would describe this is similar to the way that I would describe Ham on Rye, and yet Ham on Rye is like an instant Dan Core classic. It's like a certified Dan classic. Whereas I won't be saying that about The Lobster, but I couldn't even necessarily, in some ways, like The Lobster is doing things with a more talented production and cast and clever writing than the thing that I loved. And I think it just comes back to exactly what you just said is like sometimes things work for you and sometimes they don't work for you.
Yep. So Yorgos Lanthimos, as a director, has carved out that niche for himself. He seems to be the weird guy doing weird stuff these days. You know, once upon a time, maybe I don't know, Tim Burton had, of course, he's always been like commercially inclined as well and has kind of lost his juice the last 2 decades. But Lanthimos seems well regarded by cinephiles. What is your previous experience with Yorgos, Dan?
So I think you're right about that. And I think there's another layer to it, which is that he is misanthropic in a way that I don't think of, for example, Burton being misanthropic. Like he just seems to kind of relish in bad things happening to its characters and to kind of, I don't know, like it feels sometimes mean spirited. So I had gotten this sense from what I'd read and the trailers I'd seen about him that I was like, I just have a hunch it's gonna feel like not good to me to watch these movies. Not that they're necessarily gonna be like gross or scary or subversive or transgressive in a way I didn't like. Just it wouldn't feel good to watch them. But I did watch all 10 Best Picture nominees this year. By the way, Brian said tomorrow is the 17th, which means today's the 16th, which means yesterday was the 15th, the day of the Oscars. So I actually didn't watch the ceremony. What I like to do with the Oscars is I just hate commercials so much is I find a stream of the Oscars after they've aired, and then I watch it and just skip over the commercials so that I trim off like 1.5 of the 4 hours or something like that. So I will watch it. I haven't watched it yet. But I did see the list of winners. And one of the Best Picture nominees was his movie called Begonia. And it was my first Yorgos movie. So The Lobster watched shortly afterwards is my second Yorgos movie. Begonia still has some weirdness, but it's much more of a thing that's there. It's like you can be like, okay, that's the shape of a story. It's what it is it's a kidnapping thriller. And so a character gets kidnapped. Emma Stone gets kidnapped by
Jesse Plemons, right?
Jesse Plemons. That's right. I was trying to think of his name. They're both like out of this world good in their acting, and they're both like extreme parodies of types. Emma Stone is a CEO, and Jesse Plemons is a conspiracy theorist convinced that the elites are aliens. For whatever reason, the dark comedy of it, and also just like the way that it's acted and it kind of fits in the satire into the story so well, really, really clicked for me. That's in my top 10 of the year. I really liked Begonia. And I was kind of surprised how much I liked it because I went in with some trepidation on Yorgos because, like I said, I've just had red flags on whether I like his style.
And he's teamed up a lot lately with Emma Stone, right? Didn't he do Pretty Things?
Poor Things.
Poor
Yeah.
Things.
Yeah. And then Kinds of Kindness. So it's three in a row. And I think Emma Stone won for Poor Things and was nominated for Begonia. I am about to drop, like shortly after this recording, BADS, the Bads, on my review site, which is my end of year mini Oscars type post. And I have Emma Stone as best performance of the year by a leading actress. So I thought she was so, so good in it. But it is kind of interesting that she's like, it's like a De Niro and Scorsese situation kind of now. It's like seems like they just work with each other. You know, Emma Stone's had a long career leading up to that. And I would be interested to see her work with someone else too, because she's a great one.
I think, did they also do The Favorite together?
Yes.
And that also had Olivia Colman, who shows
That's
up in
right.
this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so enough beating around the bush. I want to say the little bit that I knew about The Lobster before this week, which was the blurb, which is, in this society depicted in the film, if you are a single adult and you can't get your act together and partner up, the government turns you into an animal.
So the one thing I was unclear about, Brian, is the main people that we see are all have former partners, if I'm not mistaken. So is it only like after you get together with someone, you must always be with someone, or is it all adults, period?
There's not enough here to clarify that. It's very nebulous and like intentionally ambiguous on many fronts, and that's what I'm gonna knock it for. Is it raised a lot of questions. I wanted to know the answers. I wanted to see the technical details. I wanted to know more about the government. I wanted to know a lot more about this procedure, and we're going to come back to that. If you come in wanting answers, you're not going to get them. So know that. Also, Yorgos as a name for somebody who directs weird movies just seems perfect to me. It sounds extremely alien. I know it's just the Greek way to say George.
But it does no, it does sound like someone who'd come in like you're like, who's that weird guy? Oh, that's Yorgos. It's like, yeah, okay, Yorgos. Oh, what's Yorgos saying over there? It's just like you're right. For whatever reason, it sounds like a weird person name.
Yeah, it's like a fill-in name for a foreigner, like Balky on Jimmy Neutron, or Balky on Perfect Strangers and Bulby on Jimmy Neutron.
There's a meme. Katie, my wife, sent it to me. This woman posted. I think it was in the first person, the meme. It may have been like somebody describing something else, somebody else's experience, but she was in France and was out for the night and had met this just handsome and exotic French man and said, well, what's your name? And he said, you're not going to like it. And she said, tell me. And he said, Kevin. And she said, he was exactly right. I did not like it. It's like Pierre is the name that you would expect, something like that.
Yeah, Henri. I was also thinking, watching this movie, of Kafka. Have you read any Kafka, Dan?
No, I haven't.
Where often his thing is he'll depict a society where things are inscrutable but Byzantine. Like, that there are all these layers of like despotic government who are doing things that you'll never understand, and you have no agency as a common person. It's like it's over and above your pay grade, and so you can't delve into the absurdity and the powerlessness that comes with that. So in college, I took a dedicated Kafka class. Actually, in German, I took it.
Oh, interesting.
And one of my papers, I'll admit, I didn't actually read the book. And so then my paper was not good, and the teacher called me out on it. But then on my second paper, I did read the book, and the professor sent me an email that said it was the best work on Kafka he'd ever read by an undergraduate. So I was like,
Wow.
okay, that's a nice flip-flop. I have that saved in my folder with the puppet potential email from the other professor. But yeah, interesting guy, Franz Kafka. Not sunshine and rainbows kind of guy. I sometimes think about the difference between Franz Kafka and Frank Capra.
Oh man. They're like mirror images of each other.
Exactly. But anyhow, in this film, main character is played by Colin Farrell. Also, a lot of the characters don't even get names. They're like the woman. They're kind of identified by their traits more than their name.
Hmm.
But I believe this character is named David, and he shows up at the hotel, which is like a rehab center for recent singles. It's like you've fallen off the wagon, you're suddenly single, and this has to be fixed. And so in this program that the hotel runs, you've got 45 days to partner up. And if you fail to find a mate, the authorities are going to turn you into an animal.
And there's a lot of stuff that gets introduced here. So one is just to make sure that it's like clear that this is literal. You get transformed into an animal. You have the main character, Colin Farrell. He brings a dog with him, and he's like, "This is my brother." It's interesting because you're like, well, is it still your brother? It's now a dog. Does it? What characteristics does it share with being your brother? And there's a little bit of interrogation by this movie on like, what are the things that make us who we are and how we are compatible with other people? But this is also just like a dumb and dark joke. It's like, here is my brother. He is now just a dog. Like, there's nothing else about him that's my brother. But he is my brother, but he's a dog. Like, fully, he's not like expressing anything about like anything anthropomorphic. He's just a dog. I don't know.
Who wants to eat hot dogs? Yeah, we've discussed a couple times on the pod interiority or lack thereof when it comes to animals who are not human. And there is some good, interesting discussion in this movie, a little bit of like what part of yourself persists after you've transformed. Like there's a guy stands up in the singles AA meeting and talks about his experience. Because pretty soon David makes friends with two guys there. It's like a middle school dance. It's like one side of the building is men and one side of the building is women, and they gotta figure out how to pair off.
Did you know, Brian? Did you know?
So when he first shows up, I did not know. It was a pleasant surprise. So he makes friends with two men who are here in the program, and one has a lisp and one has a limp. And the one who has a lisp is John C. Reilly.
Surprise John C. Reilly, like a former staple of the Goods, a film podcast, hasn't reared its head in a while. But here we had a surprise John C. Reilly.
It comes rushing back to us. It's like, oh my God, he's here. But the limping one, who's played by Ben Whishaw.
And he shows up in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen him before. He tells the story that his mother got turned into a wolf, and then he missed his mother, and he jumped into a wolf enclosure at the zoo. And he says, and they all leapt upon me except two of them, and I suspect one of the two is my mother.
One bit about all of this that I liked is by far my favorite performance in the film was Olivia Colman as the hotel manager. And she's just delivering like the cruel reality of this. Like again, the way that you would expect someone who's like just in charge of like a basic like functioning thing that you need to do. I don't even know. It's like a principal of a school or something like that. Like describing these utterly absurd things, and she's so funny. Olivia Colman is a terrific actress. I loved it.
Yeah, they conduct the onboarding interview with Colin Farrell. They're like, so are you heterosexual or homosexual? He's like, is there a bisexual option? No. Yeah, it's like, I guess keep your options open if you gotta exist in this society. So I was wondering, Dan, if you found yourself in this society, or just like what do you think are the broader implications of this society? So I guess I do want to hear your input. I'm gonna butt in and say my input, which is I feel like people would be inclined to stay together.
Yes.
Like I don't know how widespread this problem would be.
Well, I think one thing that I really went up and down on with this film is, did its satire work? Or was he really just saying, really makes you think, huh? Because kind of what movie is quote unquote about is the pressures that society puts upon people to pair up, and the way that the family unit, the romantic couple unit, becomes something that's enforced and almost assumed that someone will have, and like if you didn't do it, that you failed. And then kind of as an extension of that, like the ways that we find compatibility with people are sometimes just so obtuse and like hard to pin down, that if we like reduce it to these facile shallow things, like, do you have a lisp? And if someone else has a lisp, well then you must be a great partner. It just kind of highlights how absurd romance as a construct is, I guess, or something like that. But as far as your question about like if there was a law that you had to get married by the time you're 30 with dire consequences if you didn't, and if you broke up with someone, then things turned really bad for you. I think you're right. I think there would be more incentive for people to stay together in bad relationships, and to have less agency about their lives, for sure.
You also get to pick what animal you get to be if the clock runs out. And I think it's 45 days that he's got. So he picks a lobster, and his argument as to why is that they live long lives, if not caught in a net. And at least from the scientific studies that have been run, seem like they don't age. So it's like stay, clarity of mind, whatever that means for a lobster, and stay virile. So that's his logic. But I was wondering, Dan, what animal would you pick?
Well, I'll get my answer to that. I want to first ask one more thing about the lobster. So, how much of the show Friends have you seen, Brian?
Very little.
Okay, so there's something from one of the episodes where there's like a recurring line, "Who's your lobster?" And that's because I guess, at least according to the Friends episode, if I'm remembering correctly, lobsters are one of the few animal species that mate with one partner for life. So for like the entirety of their, I don't know what happens if one of them dies, one of them doesn't, or whatever, but like the gist of it is that lobsters stay with one person forever in extremely steady fashion. And I was wondering if that was like a reference and if that was even going to come up at some point in the movie, but it didn't. They just landed on lobsters don't age in the normal way that organisms do, you know?
Right.
But I would want, like, they talk about how everybody always picks a dog, which, to be fair, dogs are usually cheerful. You're probably gonna feel good if you're a dog most of the time, and somebody's taking care of you at least. I almost want to be like, just wipe away my consciousness, make me like a worm or something like that, you know? So like I can exist for one day and not be aware of anything in my past or future. Just like, here, I'm going to eat some dirt. That's maybe that's like a cynical take, but I don't know. What about you, Brian? What would you take?
I think I'd be some kind of a bird.
Oh, that was going to be my backup.
I mean, you can fly.
Bro.
That would be a very different perspective for sure. As Dan said, for some reason, the people in this world lock in on you gotta share a characteristic with the person that you're interested in. And okay, yeah, that's true to life in some sense. It's like you gotta have some commonality, but it's like whatever they penciled in as their like guess who trait when they joined the hotel. That's what has to match. And it's very silly. Like, I think they're going for comedy with this.
Definitely. Yeah.
My thing is a limp, so is anybody limping? Oh no, she just twisted her ankle. That's not permanent. It'll be gone in a week.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of bits about this. Like, you have to have that one matching trait with someone. And it's like not just that, but you almost ceremoniously announce this is the thing that ties us together. We both have a blank, you know? And the one that gets it's almost like the lens through which you can view like what does this movie have to say about romance and connection is the Ben Whishaw character. He falls in love with this woman at the rehab center who has a nosebleed. And so he wants to have a nosebleed too, so he can connect with her. So every day he smashes his nose on his desk. We get one really good shot of him smashing his nose on a desk in order to have a nosebleed so that he can connect with the woman. There's a couple other good gags and subplots about how real is the thing that ties the people together, but that's one that I was thinking a lot about.
And the hotel authorities have ways of encouraging coupling. So it's a lot of different rules, but it's like if you masturbate, they shove your hand in a toaster, which happens to John C. Riley.
This was one of the funniest parts of the movie. First of all, John C. Riley, he makes everything better. He somehow fits into every possible comedy mode. It's like who would have thought that John C. Riley's affable dopiness would fit so nicely with Yorgos Lanthimos, but it does. And when he's trying to explain what he was thinking, and then they stick his hand in the toaster, and you get like 30 seconds of him shouting while his hand's being burnt in a toaster. Definitely one of the biggest laughs for me.
Yeah, I agree. He elevates most movies that he shows up in, and he tends to always be funny. Meanwhile, though, the staff is like sexually stimulating the guests, but not, not to culmination, not to climax. So the energy is high.
Yeah, this was just weird. Every time it happened, I felt uncomfortable because it's like taking the actual intimacy out of an intimate act. And I do think this is also supposed to be satire. Like, what does intimacy happen when you grow up and things change in your life? But like I said, made me uncomfortable.
They also stage propaganda plays, like pro relationship propaganda plays of, what if you're a man who lives alone and you choke? Nobody can Heimlich you.
And this had me thinking about, and again, I'm sure this is intentional, had me thinking about the way that it's almost assumed that like a story will have a romantic subplot in it. It's just like heterosexual romance. Basically every narrative, it's like that is the union of that is glorified,
Yeah.
in Western stories.
I was also thinking of like sex ed in fifth grade.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then outside the hotel, so the days are ticking down, and like ostensibly this is the arc of the story is you either pair off or you don't, and if you don't, you get turned into an animal. But then there's this other element where outside the hotel there is a pack of wild loners living in the woods, and they're like feral singles. And okay, so this is like a window into a larger world outside. And you wonder, are we going to explore that? And yes, we're gonna wind up off the train tracks. We're gonna be out in the woods with these wild loners. And I was thinking of I listened to a podcast about the history of the Haitian Revolution back in the like early 1800s. And in Haiti, so it was a slave society. Many people enslaved, but like far more slaves than there were overseers. So like very imbalanced population with the vast majority being enslaved. And so ultimately when there was a revolution, it was the only successful slave rebellion in history, where it was like they overthrew the government, they took their own freedom. But in the lead up to this, there were communities of what were called maroons on the island because it's an island. You can't really go anywhere. Even if you get free, you're stuck on Haiti. And so there were these groups called maroons that basically they would run off into the woods and the mountains, and there were already some people out there who had gotten free in the same way. And so it was almost like there were these villages, not quite cities, but these settlements out in the woods of these people who had freed themselves, like a weird parallel civilization to what was officially the government of Haiti. Anyway, that's what I was thinking about here. It doesn't get that explored, but it's like these people who are out there outside the bonds of this dystopia.
Well, you said it doesn't really get that explored, but I actually felt like we got a lot of time with them before the runtime was done. Definitely doing some irony and commentary here as well too.
That's true. We spend more time in this new dynamic than I expected or that I wanted, frankly. I wanted to see the animal transition. I wanted to see it, and we never see it. And there's not even a lobster on screen at any point in this movie. It felt cheap. It felt restricted by budget.
Yeah, I mean, I never was under the impression that we were going to see an animal transformation. I mean, it's like a talky comedy, but I mean, if that's the pitch, it's not entirely unreasonable to hope you'll see it. But like, I don't know, it's not giving really sci-fi vibes.
Well, it's like we have humans and we have animals, but you just gotta trust that the transformation happened. It's like they could just give you a dog. They could give you a bird and say, oh yeah, this is your family member that we disappeared. And you just have to trust.
That almost felt to me intentional. It's like, is this really connected to that person? I mean, I think the animals are playing like a combination of like metaphor and absurd thing, but like the transition itself isn't really like the transformation itself isn't really the focus. It's like the sort of apocalyptic feeling. Although there is a bit where Olivia Colman is describing the process of your insides shifting, which had me laughing and did have me wondering, like, could you do a version of this where you actually see the transformation?
Right. Yeah, I was expecting something more Cronenbergian. But while he's at the hotel, David is exploring some possible relationships. First, there's this woman who like approaches him on the bus. So, okay, there are these loners out in the woods, and by default, you only get to spend 45 days at the hotel, but you can add days to your count by hunting loners. They have daily like trips out into the woods, and you can hunt the loners. And if you rack up a count, then you get extra days in your total.
And the romantic pursuit has sometimes been likened as a hunt.
One of these trips out into the countryside, this woman approaches him and is flirting with him, and I think her trait is she likes cookies or something. But for whatever reason, he's not interested. And my question is why? I mean, it's like, okay, the only mission here is to pair up. And if you do it, you've succeeded. And you can't just be like, oh, I'll have a cookie. But, okay. And she says that if she can't successfully pair up, she's going to jump out the window of her hotel room. But she says she's on the first floor. Which, all right, Dan. In America, first floor means a certain thing. It means the first floor. In Europe, and this was something that I learned in German class, first floor is the first floor above the ground floor.
Right.
So you got the ground floor, and then the first floor is what we in America call the second floor. Some of the things that America does, I don't agree with. I don't say are the most logical way to do things. I think there's arguments to be made both ways. For instance, with the breakdown of dates, like, do you say the day first or the month first? And as far as like feet versus meters, I do think feet are more relatable to the human scale. Like 1 meter versus 2 meters, that's a big difference. It's like not a lot of people are 2 meters tall, you know? But the floors, I mean, the floor that you're on, when you enter in, before you go up, that's the first floor that you're on. I don't see the argument the other way.
All right, so the argument the other way would be if there are a lot of buildings that have lower floors. If you think of a number line, 0 is the dividing point between below and above. For example, if let's say if you go to basement level 1, Brian, so that's kind of like floor -1, but then you go to the first floor, that's +1. That to me would suggest a distance of 2 floors. But in the American system, that's not true. You go from floor -1 to floor +1, and you've only gone 1 step, not 2 steps. So the base, like the 0 as the starting for your counting, the ground floor being 0 in this case, makes sense to me if you're doing a lot of like there are basements, and that is again kind of the negative number on the number line scale. But yes, I do kind of agree with you that again, it's like think of a house. So I have a house that has the ground level, which I call the first floor, and it has upstairs and it has the basement. I don't need numbers for those, but I do call ground level the first floor. And it is the first one. It's like the main one, so it's prime, it's one, but also it's like, I don't know. It feels more intuitive, maybe just because I grew up with it.
I understand what you're saying. And what I would compare it to is years. You're not 1 year old until you've completed your first year.
Right.
And so for a year, you're 0. And we don't really talk about it that way. Well, we count months at that point with a baby. But other people will say, well, there was no year 0 on the calendar. It started with year 1. And I don't really know about that. I would want to talk to Gavin about that as far as how things were dated in the flip-flop between BC and AD, because it seems very confusing to me. Like, obviously, when it was BC, people weren't using BC. So what did they use? I've heard that in ancient Rome, they referred to the year that so-and-so was consul, and that would be crazy confusing because, like, you'd have to memorize all the consuls. But anyway, the floor that you're on, when you enter in at the ground level, it's a finished floor. There's no waiting for the floor to be finished. It's not an incomplete floor as you step in through the door. It is a whole thing. It is complete. So first floor.
But the ground hasn't been, if the ground is 0, you haven't reached a floor until you have actually gone upstairs by your year counting. It's like you are on the 0th year while you are between 0 and 12 months. And likewise, you are on the 0th floor, the ground floor, until you actually go up a set of stairs.
I guess. I think it's putting too much importance on height. You're occupying the story just standing on the floor. There's no climbing needed.
And as for there being no year 0, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure everybody agrees that was a mistake and a bit of historical idiocy. Like there should have been a year 0. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the consensus because it makes like mathing out how many years ago did something happen wrong. You're always going to be off by 1 if you're crossing over from the AD or whatever we call it now, CE to the past, BCE, BC.
Right. Long story short, she does jump out the window, and that's a stupid move because whether you're at what we call the first floor or what we call the second floor, it doesn't make too much of a difference. It could mess you up. It messes her up. I mean, her head is like twisted backwards.
Yeah, it's the one thing in this. I wouldn't say the one thing. It's one of the few things that's gross in this movie is seeing her not in good shape after she jumps out the window. But did she actually jump from that floor? Because she was also talking about going to a higher floor to jump or something. I didn't quite know. I guess it was the first floor that she jumped from.
I think one of the attendants said it was from the first floor.
Gotcha. Because I feel like I could jump from my story, which I'm currently on, which is my upstairs, to the ground and like it would hurt, but I wouldn't be thinking that I would be killing myself by doing it, you know?
Exactly. It's like maybe you twist your ankle, but I guess we got
Right.
to test it. I guess there's no other way.
When I was in fourth grade, I made a video with my friends, and it was a thing where it was like supposed to tell the story of a book. And we did that in about 4 minutes, and then we had about 7 minutes of bloopers of us just goofing around. And one of the things was one of my friends got convinced to jump off a deck, and it was like a situation where that was like a full story up. So he jumped off the deck and we filmed it. And when he fell, he landed just fine, except he kind of like came down and he like squatted down as he came down and his chin bumped really hard into his knee and his head flung back. And we still included it in the video. He probably got a minor concussion or something like that. I always think of that when people jump is like, it's not just your legs, it could be your head if your head hits your leg when you hit the ground.
Now, see, these are the things we can dive into when we only watch one movie in a week, is we can talk about heads hitting knees. And I did a 24 speed film one year where we had Ben jump off the balcony of his house. And yeah, so essentially the second story, and he made it to the ground and was intact. But like the maiming of this woman who jumped is David's in with a like a psychopath woman. A woman who, what's the other word that they use? Not a psychopath, but a sociopath.
Sociopath, yeah.
Right. Where it's like she feels no emotion. I feel like people use those terms kind of interchangeably. But she like enjoys cruelty. And so then his idea is, oh, well, there's an in. I'll just say that I have no empathy. Which seems like one of the harder things to fake.
This was throwing me off a little bit too. So back about this woman who essentially killed herself and why didn't he get with her? So there's this episode of The Wonder Years. It's one of the best episodes of The Wonder Years called something like Don't You Know What Women Want or something like that. The premise is essentially the dilemma that Colin Farrell is facing here, which is that Kevin Arnold, the lead character of The Wonder Years, who's like 10 years old, hits it off sort of with this girl who is like by all metrics a perfect fit for him. Similar sense of humor. They get along. She's super nice. She likes him a lot. And yet he like just doesn't feel romantically towards her. And so like should he try to be his girlfriend anyways or listen to what his heart and his instincts say? And the episode, to be fair, ends kind of ambivalently. But I think that's kind of what this scenario, this episode of the film was going for, which is that sometimes in life, the ones that like would be good matches for us are not the people that we want to be with. Just like that's our hearts tell us not to be with that person. The extent to which that is a good idea or a bad idea is debatable.
Sure. But also everybody's got a gun to their head. Everybody's playing Squid Games.
I'm completely with you on that because at that point it's like this is you stumbled into it. Here it is. Liking cookies as your trait. Are you kidding me? That's like the best possible thing to share with someone. You're never gonna not like cookies. And then he immediately pivots and finds a match in like the worst possible trait, like not feeling emotions or sadness when sad things happen, and has to pretend that bit.
Right. And he pulls it off for a while until the heartless lady kicks his dog brother to death.
And she just like again says it matter of factly, I killed your brother. He's lying in a heap in the bathroom. And he goes in there and sees the dog and tears trickle out. And she's like, I knew it. I knew it. You have feelings. You have feelings. You're sad that your brother died. This was kind of funny too.
Yeah, and so then she's running down the hallway to tattle on him because you're not supposed to lie. You're not supposed to feign the connections. That's also against the rules. So they're like chasing each other through the annals of the hotel to get to the transformation room. And okay, so at this point, I was like rubbing my hands together. Finally, we're going to see one of these things. Because they're rushing to the transformation room. The threat is that if you lie in your coupling, you get turned into the animal no one wants to be. Of course, we're never going to find out what that animal is. I guess it's supposed to be up to your imagination. Like, the most terrible thing in the world is in room 101. I was also thinking of 1984, where it's like, can a relationship blossom in a horrible dystopia? But I was wondering, Dan, what was your picture for this animal? Because you want to be a worm, apparently. So, okay, so what is the animal? What's the terrible one?
um, feel like you need to be aware and just miserable. I don't know.
Maybe it's like an animal in a certain situation. Like in Pinocchio, they turn you into a donkey and make you work in the salt mines or something.
Yeah, I could see that. Also, one of the things that really makes my skin crawl is like videos or pictures of animals that have parasites. That to me would be the worst because, like, if you're an animal in the wild, you can't get treatment for that, you know?
That's true. Parasites are really, really gross. But as they're running, suddenly a maid emerges from one of the hallways and, like, does a face turn, reveals that she's on Colin Farrell's side, and she takes out the sadistic woman. Like, shoots her with one of the tranquilizer darts. And then Colin Farrell drags the sadistic woman into the transformation chamber. Then the next scene, he says that he turned her into an animal. So, can anybody perform this procedure, Dan? Again, of course, we don't see it. It's like we don't know how he did what he did, but I guess a layman can do the animal process.
I imagined it like an electric chair, big switch, but I don't know. You're right. It's ambiguous.
Yeah, it's like a bottle opener on a Coke bottle. It's just, okay, here's a accessible piece of technology that anybody can use. Yeah, flip a switch. I think it would be more complicated than that. Like biosurgery is involved. I don't know. Maybe we need to watch Hoppers to get the answer.
Is that the new Pixar?
Yeah,
I don't know much about it. Isn't it like you inhabit the body?
they're putting their brains in animals.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm hung up on this. Dan's not hung up on this, and so that's the point where we differ. I was really bummed. The only points I'm going to take away are because I didn't get to see one of these transformations. But now David has to like run away and live in the woods. And so like the last third of the movie at least, it really felt more like half is he is now in a new paradigm. He's among the loners out in the woods. And I was thinking of like Swiss Army Man or something.
Yeah, this whole thing is weird. So I actually found in general the hotel bit part because we had both Olivia Colman and John C. Riley hanging with us. The humor worked a little bit more for me, even though there's still a lot that's not too explained. And then yeah, we spent a lot of time out here in the wild. So yeah, he's running off and trying to make it on his own, and then he becomes one of those people that were being hunted. And what do you know? They are just as strict and have just as many rules as the hotel.
Right. So this group, their rule, when you're in the hotel, you must be trying to partner up. So this like woods cult treats that as evil. You must not have any kind of romantic connection. You have to be alone, even though they're in a group. And so the way that they have recreational time is they have dances, but you have to dance alone. And so we only listen to EDM. They do like commando raids into the settlement of the couples. So we also see this third place, which is the city, which is where the like officially partnered people live. If you have succeeded by the metric of the society and you formed a romantic couple, you go and you live in the upscale city. But these loners can do these sabotage raids where they pretend to be couples. That's like their disguise is being a couple. And they can go into the city. I guess they don't have any kind of record of who the couples are. You could just show up as long as you're a couple. That's the important thing.
Although there is one bit where like a cop is like show me your license. And we're like, oh my God, is he going to get caught like pretending to be a person with a couple? And no, it turns out their operation has counterfeit documents too.
Often what these raids involve is they'll just point out all the ways that the partners are lying to each other. So the limping man gets outed that he doesn't get authentic nosebleeds. I mean, his nose is bleeding, so
It's a good point.
it's a thin line, I think, but they're not organic. And also, I think, is Olivia Colman suffer one of these raids?
Yeah, where well, because kind of what they do, part of it is to humiliate the people. It's not just to like out them, but to humiliate and like fracture their romance. It's like if I can't experience the happiness of love, then I will make sure your flawed love is miserable. Except they've chosen not to experience love at least to some extent. But that if they're all getting there the same way that Colin Farrell is, where they kind of tried it and it didn't work, can you really say that they chose it? It was almost like the last resort, but we don't necessarily get the backstories for everyone who's in the cult. But it's easy to imagine that like they're the jaded people who couldn't find romance, so they're going to sour everybody else's. But with Olivia Colman, they basically give a gun to Olivia Colman's husband. I forget exactly how they do it, but they like manipulate him into saying he would be able to live by himself without her better than she would be able to live by herself without him. So that he has to kill Olivia Colman, the husband of Olivia Colman, or the partner or whatever. He pulls the trigger, but there's no bullet in it. And then they just run off. You don't see what the aftermath of that is, but it's very easy to imagine how that would like break apart a relationship. He was ready to kill her in order to save his own life.
Right. So it's bust in, say something that leaves the relationship in shambles, and then leave. And my biggest laugh in the movie was then it smash cuts to the loner celebration out in the woods, and they all have headphones on, so you don't really even hear the music, but they're breaking it down, doing this techno dancing. That this is mission accomplished, and front and center is this maid from the hotel who's a double agent, and she's just dancing with so much gusto. And apparently, this actress is the wife of Yorgos Lanthimos.
Okay, interesting.
So I feel like this this moment was important. But as he's living among the loner community, even despite all the restrictions, David does bond with Rachel Weisz from the Mummy movies, the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies. I think that's the only other place I've ever seen her. She doesn't have a name in the movie, even though she does narrate it. She's the short-sighted woman, and wouldn't you know it, Colin Farrell is also short-sighted. And so, oh, they've got a match.
A shared trait, except they're in the cult where you're not allowed to be romantic with each other. But then also they go and they play as couples in the society, except they're not really couples there. They're just playing. But then also, how different is that from the quote unquote real couples as we sometimes see, you know?
Right, is being in a couple just playing a part to begin with. And the leader of the loners is this woman who begins to suspect that they're not actually pretending. They actually like this stuff, this icky stuff.
And to be fair, they're like making out when they shouldn't be, when they're pretending to be a couple in the city.
Right. And the punishment that the loners have is arguably more brutal than what they do at the hotel, because it's Hammurabi stuff. It's like, steal something in the Arabian marketplace and get your hand cut off. It's like if they find you kissing, they give you Joker smiles and then make you make out. So that seems pretty gross. That's another thing
Yeah.
they don't really show. They just show the bandaged aftermath. And they also say that they'll do it, a version of it, if you have sex. And you're left to imagine that.
Right.
But you imagine some, like, Seven stuff.
Genital mutilation.
Right. But despite it all, they pursue a relationship. And because they like got to live quiet out in the woods, they're communicating with each other through this form of sign language that they made up.
And I thought this was kind of funny. It's like each gesture has a meaning, but like they're very specific, but also kind of the same. Like, I love you very much, and I can't wait to see you again if you raise your right arm or something like that.
Yeah, so what it felt like to me was like signs that I think it's that the catcher gives to the pitcher in baseball,
Oh yeah, yeah. I can see what you're saying.
but they're like flirting with each other. So they're like getting hot and bothered while they're giving these pitcher signs. So that was pretty funny. But the loner leader who has cottoned on to this burgeoning relationship takes, I'm just going to call her Evie because that was her name in the Mummy movies, takes Evie into the city to get corrective surgery on her eyes, ostensibly to make her not short sighted anymore, but maliciously blinds her. Okay, a couple thoughts on this, Dan. Wouldn't it have just been enough to fix her short sightedness? Because then, by the rules of the society, she couldn't have this relationship with. It's not Brendan Fraser. Now I got Brendan Fraser on the brain. Colin Farrell.
Frasier on the brain. So I was thinking about this too, because it's, yeah, that would have been like kind of a funny, dark irony in and of itself. It's like you get this surgery that's going to make your life better, and as a result, you ruin the relationship you have. And yet they don't settle for that. They just jump straight to the cruel thing.
Right. And so now she's got to stumble around blind, and Colin Farrell does like try to help her out, try to help her navigate, but at the same time feels this loss of, oh, now we don't have the thing in common anymore. So what could we have in common? And they have some discussions about like what could be our commonality, and they can't find anything else.
They also do a thing where they play a game together, and the game is he gives her something, and she has to feel it with her hands and say what it is. And we see this game twice. And the first time, it's a plastic cup, and she gets it right. And the second time, he hands her a tennis ball, and she says, "It's a kiwi, like the fuzzy fruit." And he says, "Yes, you're right." And it's like, how could you mistake a tennis ball as anything other than a tennis ball? I feel like if I had no context for what you were going to give me and you gave me a tennis ball, I would be able to identify that thing.
Man, Dan is just throwing the gauntlet down. It's like you got to put your money where your mouth is at a certain point. You've already challenged yourself to jump out your window and blind yourself and feel a tennis ball.
Well, I'm not going to do any of those things, Brian. I would do a closed eye game where I have to identify something, but I'm not going to risk self-mutilation.
Well, someone who is going to risk self-mutilation is Colin Farrell, because in the end of the movie, so first he ties up the leader of the loners and like leaves her in a pit. The implication is she gets eaten by dogs. I don't know if that actually happens. It's more like the dogs show up. And then he runs off with Rachel Weisz. They go to the city, and he stops at a diner bathroom to blind himself. So then they'll be a match again.
Right. They'll both have blindness. Yeah. And he says to the waitress, "Hi, can you bring me a knife, but not a butter knife, like a sharp steak knife?" And the waitress just says, "Okay," and runs off and gets it. I watched this movie with my wife, and as soon as we got sat down and they were talking and he said that, I was like, "Oh no, I can't believe it's doing this. Is he really gonna do this?" But what did you think about the exact point where the movie ended, Brian?
Okay, so assuming I didn't need to watch all the way to the end of the credits, there's a long time spent watching Rachel Weisz sitting at the table.
Just waiting.
Right. Is there more that happens after that?
No. Well, except the scene before that is him staring into the mirror, holding the knife up there, and then it cuts to her. And my question is, are we to assume that he did it? Is maybe the reason we see such a long shot on her at the end that he ran away and he chickened out? We don't hear any screams or anything like that I assume you would hear if you got stabbed in the eye, even if by yourself. I don't know. It felt like a frustrating moment to end. It's like did he follow through with it or did he not? Or did he just say, this is dumb and I'm rebelling against this system and we could be in love even if I'm not blind and you are? And we don't know. We get like a 100-second shot of just her sitting there waiting for him to come back where nothing happens. And then, but here's the thing Katie pointed out, my wife, is that we get like a 5-second shot of blackness before it goes to the credits. And there's a little bit of noise over the blackness. And she was saying, I wonder if that's like, we're supposed to interpret that as like now he's seeing the world as the darkness and nothing that it is, that he's gone through this like ironic, absurd idiocy to harm himself just to fit into the society's rules. And I said, huh. So I don't know.
Yes, it's another moment of frustrating ambiguity, of which there are many in this film. My take was he is going to do it because the society is so locked in on gotta have a commonality. It would be kind of funny if he just, like you see him running through the parking lot in the background of the shot.
That would have been funny.
And so that's The Lobster from 2015.
There we go.
Yeah, strange movie by design, intentionally obtuse. I wanted to talk before we get to Is It Good about a couple other things that this had me thinking of. So, Dan, did you watch the movie Together from this past year
I did.
with Dave Franco and Allison Brie, who are a real world married couple? And in the movie, it's about a married couple who it's body horror, but it's also got supernatural stuff going on. So it's like they drink polluted water, but it's like polluted with magic.
Cursed water, yeah.
Yeah. And so their bodies start getting intertwined. And, all modern horror has to mean something, has to be, trauma of some kind.
Elevated.
But the metaphor in that movie specifically, I guess, is about what's called codependency, which, okay, codependency, I think already a loaded term because it's like, yeah, you should depend on each other. You should need each other. But I guess the idea is that can go too far. And so in the movie Together, it kind of explores the question of, are you a different person? Like, do you lose yourself when you become part of a couple? Or is the entity that you are now that couple? So I think there's some of that here in The Lobster also.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Like turning basic functions of romance into like allegory. Definitely some shared DNA.
And potentially horror, mutilation.
Yeah, right. What did you think of Together, by the way?
I liked it broadly. I thought the effects were good. I'm middling on the idea that horror has to be one-to-one with some social cause or contemporary issue. I think that's often the case, even, if you go further back. It's like something in the real world inspires the horrific element. But it used to be as simple as like you go into a unusual place, like somewhere that you haven't been before, and there is danger there. So like that's a real fear, but sometimes there can just be a monster.
Yeah. So I wrote an essay on my website in the form of a review on Psycho, where I essentially contended that one of the reasons that like horror and thriller movies tend to age really well is that it's very easy to, well, first of all, you can just enjoy them, but it's also very easy to find meaning in danger as danger evolves. And I think you're right that if you get too prescriptive about it, you lose some of that like roundness and that ability to see whatever dark thing is going on in your life decades later or at different phases of life or something like that. I think even like you go into a place and there's danger there can be very evocative of like things that you are personally feeling and experiencing, even if you are not a person walking into a haunted house, literally, But part of the great things about like good thrillers and horror movies is that you don't need that. They could just be like good lizard brain scared or like great narrative tension, all that stuff that doesn't require that. I thought Together was kind of underwhelming. It's funny you mentioned the effects because I feel like you only get effects in like the last scene. It's like there's very little actual effects up until then that's body horror. And that to me was kind of underwhelming. It's like it saved all of it. There's like one or two scenes where there's a suggestion of it, but you don't actually see it. And then like you get some really cool that last scene effects. But I don't know. I found it not bad, but just didn't really stir me in any way.
Uh-huh. This is gonna spoil the movie, so skip 30 seconds ahead, listeners, if you don't want to be spoiled. But something I thought was really effective was there's this character in the story who is presented as, oh, this guy is trying to steal Alison Brie away. He's like her work husband. But then as it goes, you realize he's not even a one guy. He is one of these fusions who is pushing. He's not trying to steal Alison Brie. He is, in fact, pushing fusion. I thought that was really compelling. I thought it was funny, and I wasn't expecting it. And that he is actually showing what happens once you've undergone this transformation. And then the very last shot is the Brie Franco fusion steps out the door.
Right, because that's the thing is when you togetherify, you become like a hybrid of the two.
So yeah, ultimately I tilted positive on it. But then the other thing that I was thinking of is a Twilight Zone episode that in its original release it was called The Private World of Darkness, but it's more famously known by its later title, Eye of the Beholder. Have you ever seen Eye of the Beholder, Dan?
I don't think so.
Okay. So in Eye of the Beholder, it's shot in an interesting way because the central character is a woman whose face is wrapped up in bandages, and she's in a hospital. And they say that she's undergoing a procedure to fix her face. The whole episode, like the first 22 minutes of the 26 minutes, you don't see anybody else from the shoulders up. You just see shoulders down. You don't see anybody else's face in this world.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And the whole time her face is covered, but she talks about that she's always scared children around her. And the way she talks about it is that she's disfigured and very upsetting to look at. And the society, as we come to learn about it, obliquely, is like this totalitarian society where everyone must look one way, and that if you are abhorrent and ugly, you can undergo some experimental procedures and maybe they'll work, but it's implied that actually they rarely work. And that if you're one of these disfigured outcasts, you get sent off to like parallel leper colonies where you have to live. But then in the final like 3 minutes of the episode, finally the bandages come off and everybody, all the doctors rear back and scream. And then it shows the face and she's Ellie Mae Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies. Like super beautiful, hot young woman, 60s, paragon of beauty. And then it cuts to all the doctors and they have horrible pig faces. And they're like running around in chaos screaming. But in this society, the norm is pig face. And then, like, you don't get a whole lot of time spent interrogating this. But on the TVs in the hospital hallways, there is a pig Hitler broadcasting. And he's like extolling the virtues of being pig-faced. And so then the question is, well, wait a minute. Has the world always been pig-faced? Or was like 20 years ago, was there some rise of pig Nazis who implemented everybody's got to be pig-faced? And it's not clear. I think it would be more interesting if all along the planet has been pig-faced.
Well, I mean, Hitler pushed Aryan beauty, right? So it's not like he invented and was the first one to advocate for Aryan beauty, but he was, I mean, I haven't really studied too much about like what his actual messaging was, but my understanding is that like part of his message was the only beautiful and pure race are the ones who look blonde and blue-eyed, And so that would have been my interpretation of that, is that he was like making it less normalized to be looking at anything other than what that culture's vision of beauty was already.
I see. And so Ellie Mae takes off running through the hallways and, evading the doctors, but she runs into this ambassador from the Leper Island. And he's like the most handsome man you could imagine. Lance Romance, one of Ellie Mae's boyfriends from Beverly Hillbillies, like this movie star, chiseled jaw himbo. And she screams. And he's like, now, please try to understand that we can make a life together. It may seem hard at first, but we'll go to a place where people are like us. And then they have to go off together. And so I was also thinking of that, watching The Lobster. It's like, it's evocative. It makes you think, as you said. And they did a parody of this on, did you ever watch Mad TV, Dan?
I've seen a handful of skits from it.
It was a short-lived competitor to Saturday Night Live that made me laugh more frequently than Saturday Night Live. But one of the skits was a parody of Eye of the Beholder, and they take the mask off at the end of the episode, and all the doctors rear back and they say, "Oh my God, she's hot!" And the nurse, the pig nurse, is trying to explain, well, no, the dominant, perspective of beauty is based on a cultural lens. So what we say is beautiful is beautiful. And then the doctors are, the men are like, yeah, and I say she's hot. It'll be hard to go back to my pig-faced wife after this.
Sounds pretty funny.
No.
Also kind of obscure for Mad TV, like a sketch comedy show. But I do kind of respect that.
And so that is not only The Lobster, but also capsule reviews of Together and Eye of the Beholder. And so, Dan, are we now ready to say, is it good?
Which is, I think, a culturally defined. No, I'm just kidding.
Some cultures consider some things Gucci that others would consider ratchet.
So, is it good is our signature section where we each give the movie a rating on our 8-point goodness scale, ranging from a very not good, which is a 1 out of 8, to our masterpiece rating, toward a good, which is an 8 out of 8. And so I will go first on rating The Lobster. It's funny because, like, talking about it here, I actually found a lot of really interesting things to talk about, which I guess just goes to show the subjective experience of watching something that is just so distinct and really, like, demands you ride its vibe. Because as I was watching it, I was like, this is horseshit, maybe. Like, this is just wasting my time. Not necessarily quite so cynical as that, but something about it. So when I said I really liked Begonia, despite my Yorgos fears, The Lobster was more the reaction I expected to get, which is that it just wasn't very pleasant to watch. And like the whole disaffected, almost deadpan way of describing everything that was happening to him just felt like cheap. Like, if we say this thing in this flat way that should be said more excitingly, that will register as funny. I don't know. For whatever reason, I was just like anti-vibing with The Lobster. I did not hate it as much as Hunter Allen, our guest from a few weeks ago, who gave it a rare and coveted 0 out of 10
Oh my God.
on his 10-point scale. He's only done that for like 25 or 30 movies he's ever reviewed, if even that many. Honestly, I think it's less than that. Yeah, it might only be like 10 or 15 or something. Anyways, the point being that I did not hate The Lobster, but I also did not vibe with it. And talking about it, I feel a little more warmly towards it because, like, yeah, there's a lot of ideas and things that happen that are worth like digging more into. But it also, it's just not the right ingredients for me. Not the right combination. The chemical formula is off for me. The satire feels heavy-handed but not in a fun way. The absurdism feels provocative but not in the compelling way. The performances are okay, other than John C. Reilly and Olivia Colman, who just always made me smile. They just feel like not on the right register. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's unique and it's kind of well made in certain ways, and like it doesn't hold back in the sense that it just leans into its tone all the way. Now, maybe it holds back in the sense of what it shows from the points that you were bringing up, like why is it being ambiguous about these things? But just in terms of being its own thing, I can admire, and in fact, deeply admire something that is unafraid to follow the beat of its own drum, even if I am not on that same rhythm. So I almost want to go up to a 4 out of 8, but I'm still going to land on a 3 out of 8, which we call a not good, which again, just from a language perspective, feels about right about how I would describe it. It's not a bad movie, but it's just not for me. And I don't feel as if it is close to good from my own perspective. So that's where I am on The Lobster, Brian. What about you?
Okay, I'm intrigued. I gotta go read Hunter's review. Of course, he's got some unusual ones that he gives 10 twos as well. Tens too.
Yeah, I like when critics are idiosyncratic and hit something hard or fall in love with it unexpectedly. So I always enjoy when there's a zag take. I haven't actually read his review yet. I just saw that it had a 0.
So, as I kind of mentioned, I feel like there's definitely movies that do some of the things that this movie did, and I didn't like. Like, matter of factly stating something that is nonsense. I mean, we talked about this in Cats recently, where it's like, I don't care about Jellicle cats. Pollicle dogs, even less. But for whatever reason, I liked this movie. I quite liked it. I might have landed even higher if we'd seen a transformation. Like that really is what sets it back for me. The movie establishes itself, making you think you're on train tracks leading to a specific destination, and then it decides halfway through, actually, we're jumping the train tracks. We're going off, we're exploring this other facet of the society. Whereas I really wanted a few more answers. There's a lot of deliberate ambiguity. But by the end, it's like, okay, I kind of embrace that new paradigm. I think the actors are invested in bringing this weird vision to life. And broadly, I think I like satirical movies more than Dan has tended to, at least the ones we've watched on the show. I often will like if something is bitter in kind of a acerbic, funny way. And so, yeah, I don't know. I vibed with this movie. That's what you got to do. Dan was right. It's like if you're on the wavelength, you'll like it more than if you're not, and then it'll just get on your nerves in that case. So I'm going to give it, if I didn't say a number value, 6 out of 8. Very good. If we had some prosthesis in here, if we had some machinery, I'd go 7 or maybe higher, but that's not the movie that this is. I was picturing something more like Herbert West Reanimator or Frankenhooker or something where we start seeing pieces go together like a 80s body horror movie. But that was not this.
No.
But I still liked what we got.
One thing I think I said before, and I'll just repeat, is that I was more on its wavelength when we were in the hotel. I still don't know if I would have given it a passing grade based on that section. I kind of just got burned out on these sections in the woods. But yeah, I think that's fair. And I would watch another Yorgos movie. I'm just kind of curious what energy he brings to other things. Now that I've seen 2 things and just had totally different reactions to how much I vibed with them. Like he has one, it was his breakout. I think it's called Dogtooth. I don't know anything about it. I know there's like a famous scene that characters dance in it. That's literally the only thing I know about it. Like I'd be curious about that one too, for example.
Yeah, I think the next one for me would be Poor Things. I'm curious about that.
Gotcha. You should. I want you to check out Begonia sometime, Brian, because I think you'd like that one.
Okay. Well, Dan, as we are beyond any trammels of theme month, where are we going next on the podcast? What lies ahead next week?
Brian, I am going to be flying with my kids to Atlanta for spring break to go check out some museums and such down there and just to get away from DC. As such, I'm thinking about airports, and as such, I'm thinking about one of the strangest Steven Spielberg movies. Have you seen The Terminal?
Yes, I have seen this one. Krakosia.
Yes. So I want to sort through some of my feelings, which it's an unusual one. So we will be discussing The Terminal, Brian.
Great. Looking forward to it. Sounds like fun. Ties in with air travel.
Definitely. I haven't done all that much flying in my life, but I think this will be interesting, and I can talk through some of my thoughts on air travel, but also just like the way this movie depicts it, which I think is very, very interesting and unintuitive, I would say. So there you go.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, listeners. Join us again here on The Goods.
Bye.